Oh, hey guys, Bipolar Barbie here, and today I wanted to give you some facts on borderline personality disorder. I think people really don't take borderline personality disorder seriously, and that really annoys me because it is one of the most serious conditions that I have. Comparative to bipolar disorder and just straight out depression and anxiety and everything else, borderline personality disorder is pretty intense. And people will often say, someone with borderline personality disorder is just a shit person, they're just manipulative, attention seeking, sensitive. There is so much stigma around borderline personality disorder. And I think it's really important to talk about and to clarify these things because there's even a lot of stigma in people who, understand mental illness. They just, when people think about mental illness, they think about anxiety and depression, or sort of worst case scenario, schizophrenia, bipolar. But there's over 200 mental illnesses diagnosable in the Diagnostic Statistics Manual. Some of them include Parkinson's disease, autism, Tourette's. There are so many forms of mental illnesses that people don't consider when they think about mental illness. And it really annoys me because it's kind of like it's okay to have those mental illnesses, but when you talk about mental illness, people automatically judge you and tell you just to get over it because they think you just have depression. And borderline personality disorder is quite common. I was reading some statistics earlier and I was even quite shocked. 1 in 25 people have borderline personality disorder or are diagnosed with it. And what we know from these statistics is that it only shows the amount of people that actually seek help and that actually have a diagnosis. So when you keep that in mind, it's actually quite terrifying, because we know at least half of people who have some form of mental distress, who potentially have some form of mental illness or mental health concerns, don't actually reach out and get help. So 1 in 25 is pretty common. For people to not understand what this kind of illness is, you think about 1 in 25 people. I mean, you could name 25 people off the top of your head. You probably work with 25 people. You might have had 25 people at your last birthday party. You probably had 25 people, if not more, in your school class. And I think 25 people is not a lot of people. You'd probably talk to 25 people a day, unless you're in the midst of depression and you're just completely avoiding. But you would at least see 25 posts, I'm assuming, of someone that has posted something on social media. So 25 people is a really small number. And what's even more terrifying is that 80% of those people that have borderline personality disorder will try to kill themselves. All of them, though, will exhibit self-harm behaviors, whether it be burning yourself, cutting, drug and alcohol abuse, reckless driving, reckless sexual activity. I mean, there are so many things. There are so many ways you can hate on yourself. You can get really creative with the, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to punish myself. And I think when people assume or when people see the external effects of borderline personality disorder, they focus so much on how it affects them. And when it gets to the point where it's so severe and untreated, where it does become external, that's like the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more of borderline personality disorder that really goes on within someone's psyche. There are so many more symptoms that really have nothing to do even with relationships, because being borderline is really like being unstable and having a split sense of self, really just not knowing how to feel about yourself. You might evaluate a partner and then de-evaluate them, but that's normally linked to how you're constantly evaluating and then de-evaluating yourself and switching between, yeah, I'm a good person, and then, oh no, I'm a shit person, which then it's like this finger always constantly looming over the self-destruct button. And untreated for a long time, I was just slamming that goddamn button. And it's hard. And I think what is even, what a lot of people don't realize is that actually 1 in 10 people with borderline personality disorder will successfully kill themselves. Now, if you put that into comparison to the amount of people that suffer depression, well, the successful suicide rates in depression are actually only about 1 in 20 for people who suffer some form of depression. So borderline personality disorder actually has a higher kill rate, and it has a higher self-destructive rate. You will not find more than 80% of people with depression exhibiting the same self-harm behaviors. That is really prominent in borderline personality disorder. And yes, it can be a symptom of depression, because it is when you feel so low, when you hate yourself so much. But borderline is more than just being sad. It's like living on the edge. It's like constantly balancing on this unbalanced scale, this seesaw of going up and down, and it's just not knowing how to live. You didn't have some form of stable upbringing. You didn't have the right reassurances or the right validation, and you kind of don't have a stable view of yourself and your position in the world and how you should feel about yourself, how you should feel about other people. And a lot of your ideas, especially when it comes to love and evaluating people and evaluating yourself, are really unhealthy, are really quite rigid, and don't mesh well into today's society. Things aren't so subjective. Things are very right or wrong. Things are very black or white. And that's why it's kind of borderline personality disorder, although they are changing the name to a form of complex PTSD, because they're understanding now that that's what it is. It's the personality traits that you will develop from some form of trauma in your younger years. And normally a specific type of trauma, which is psychological abuse. And psychological abuse is actually, again, more linked to suicide and mental illness than physical or sexual abuse is. Which is crazy when people just don't get that. When people don't accept that psychological abuse is real. When people don't understand borderline personality disorder. And living with borderline is hard. It's terrifying. And I'm not saying that anyone is like a victim and like whatever. I honestly believe that abuse is in the eye of the beholder, but trauma is really undeniable. Whether or not you think you abused me, that's subjective in some instances, especially when it comes to psychological abuse, because people don't think that what they are doing is wrong, that bullying and, terrorizing someone in that way can damage them. But, the ramifications of that, being broken, being damaged, and being traumatized is not a choice that I have made. Regardless of who I point the finger at, or if I point a finger at all, the bottom line is the same. I have borderline personality disorder. And that affects every single aspect of my life. It is something that I deal with every single second of every single day. It is the aspect of my many illnesses that has driven me to suicide, in an instant. It is what constantly makes me switch between, yeah, you know what, I can do this, and I'm going to do things, and I'm going to be a great person, and people are finally going to accept me, to the next minute being like, no one will ever accept me, no one will ever get me, so there is no point me continuing to live. And I wouldn't say that right now I'm suicidal, because I'm not. But I am constantly in this emotional turmoil. And I don't have a boyfriend. I'm not in a relationship. Although when people ask me if I'm single, I tell them, no, I'm not. I'm in a committed relationship to myself. Because that is the most important relationship that you can have in your life. And you will not have a healthy relationship with anyone else if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself. And if you were diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, that basically means that you do not have a healthy relationship with yourself. It's not just about the unhealthy relationships that you get into, because in a way, or like definitely, it's not in a way, it's like getting into abusive relationships is a self-harming behavior. It's like trying to prove that you are worthy of being loved by people that you know won't love you. It's about not knowing why you're attracted to the drama and the darkness, because it is all that you have ever known. I don't know who I am without emotional turmoil. And I don't want to be in a state of emotional turmoil, but that is my normal. That is how I have lived my life for so long. That is how I was brought up. In a way, there is comfort in that darkness. I don't know what it's like to not have low self-esteem. I don't know what it's like to feel whole and complete and fulfilled and like I'm good enough, like I am adequate, like I am of substance and I am worthy of being alive. I have never felt like that in my life. But the reason I think borderline manifests so much in relationships is that a relationship and a partner is like a band-aid on that wound. It's like someone can make me feel special for a moment, but it will always pass. And it will pass whether that person screws me over or not. Because I don't like to admit this, but it's the honest truth. I will sabotage myself. Because if someone is incapable of accepting me, then I need to prove. It's like a game. I need to get them, and I need to go, you know what? I need to prove to you that I'm of value to you. But then on the other hand, when someone kind of comes along and is like, hey, I value you, you kind of look at them, you're like, what the hell is wrong with you? There must be something wrong with you if you value me. So you're not attracted to people who actually value you for who you are. It's like this constant back and forth and this switching and this argument, because in some fucked up sense of the world, that is the relationship that I had growing up with the people that I cared about most, with my primary caregivers, was sometimes, they'd like, it was like a mousetrap, really. They would lay a little bit of cheese out and they'd be like, yeah, come and get it, good girl. And then they would just slam me with this goddamn mousetrap and lock me in a cage. And I would be back there and just smack down. And that instability is what I think really gets under a child's skin and burrows so deep within them, it will just wrap around their core and everything. Like, it will eat away from the inside out. And I have been so good at pretending that I'm okay. So much so I prevented myself from getting help because I could talk the talk and I could walk the walk, and I didn't know how to not present well. I didn't know how to break down, especially in front of people, especially in a doctor's office, especially around people who I guess resembled the only type of validation I ever had growing up, and that would be teachers and kind of members of the community that would praise me for the achievements that I had, which was kind of the only other way I really held on to some form of self-worth. Because without that, I was constantly being told that this is wrong with you, that's wrong with you, and, you know, oh, your room's messy, therefore you're a shit person. And I think that therefore, that automatically drawing the line between just stupid ass things and using that to evaluate a person. Oh, you only got a C on your report card? Well, that C means that you were worthless as a person. And that is bullshit. And that is the part that I just wish that parents could really understand, or at least open themselves up to understanding that we all really need some education on this. So if you're going to be that asshole that's going to get in the comments and just be like, oh, people with borderline personality disorder, or my ex with like BPD or whatever, look, I'm not saying I haven't been a crazy psycho bitch. But I just want you to understand that that was coming from a really intense place. When they say intense or unreasonable emotions, you know what? I know that maybe the punishment didn't fit the crime, but at the same time, that punishment fit the amount of emotion that I was feeling. I think saying that it's incorrect emotion, it makes people think that it's all made up and they're fabricating all of these things. No, I'm trying to grapple with what the hell is going on inside me. And when I am triggered, I revert back to this child that was never taught the right amount of emotion to feel. I revert back to this basic sort of immature in the sense of how to deal with things. I wasn't taught how to deal with emotions because you weren't allowed to feel emotions. But just because you weren't allowed to feel emotions didn't mean that I didn't have them. And maybe it was because I was a bipolar child and I did have emotions that my parents didn't understand, or my low latent inhibition just made me think and function in a very different way. But whatever it was, you can't sit there and deny someone their thoughts and their feelings, because denying them is not going to take them away. You can't argue with someone and try and reason with them and convince them all the reasons why they shouldn't be angry if they're angry. Because I know that emotion, when it builds, it literally expands like this helium balloon, like I am going to explode. And unless it is acknowledged, then it's just going to grow and grow and grow until I am Mount Vesuvius and I am burying Pompeii for the third time. And then you'll just be, I guess, erased for thousands of years from history. But yeah, this has turned into a bit of a rant about borderline personality disorder, but this is just my thoughts for today. I have a whole playlist, The Story of a Borderline Princess, which does follow my thoughts on borderline personality disorder. If you're borderline, totally subscribe to my channel. because I'm constantly uploading videos about borderline, and my understanding of it grows every single day, and I'm so committed to not just spreading awareness on it, but overcoming it to myself.